how can we reduce the investment and production costs in the media and entertainment market? My name is François Abbé from Mesclado, and together with IDATE DigiWord, we've produced a comparison of the production cost of an 80-minute feature film, animation feature film, in 4 cities in the world. So, first of all, thanks very much to the many people from Artifacts, from Dwarf Animation, and also freelance people, Susie Wilson, and other people worldwide for helping out getting this data together. This comparison was produced for Montpellier Méditerranée Métropole. So we looked at the core of a production. So we left behind pre-production, we left behind post-production, mastering and distribution, although all those processes can be done locally in all of the 4 cities. So here is how we worked. We studied investment, so CapEx, so that's mainly the fit-out cost, how much it would cost to actually set up a 100-person office. Then we looked at operational cost, OPEX, both the office and the staff. And then we looked at the grants, and for the grants we focused in 2 areas, the guaranteed grants and the selective grants. Some of the guiding principles, we looked at the exchange rate, and as if we were setting up the company in December 2018, and each of the cell of the large Excel table we used, it relies on sources of information or people. So behind each cell, there's a factual data to actually compare Apple with Apple. I'm a big fan of apples. So let's start with the expenditures. First of all, the CapEx. We effectively used existing buildings in our calculation, and we looked at the fit-out costs. So 3/4 of these costs actually are to do with the furniture and the computers that the 100 staff would require. So we assumed that we rented out Class A offices on using a 3-year lease in the center of London. So we used downtown Los Angeles, downtown Vancouver, and Creative City in Montpellier. And what we found out is the cost is comparable, because you can have a high-end, top-class architect to actually design your office, or you can do it a lot more cost-effectively. So there's no significant difference between all 4 cities. The cost is roughly around 600,000 euros. In terms of OPEX, now, 2 parts to it. The first one is the office. When I say the office, is everything to do with an office or a company. And the other part is staff. So let's start with the office. So we hypothetically used fixed locations for those companies. So you'll see their addresses for each of the 4 potential companies. And we looked for basically properties to rent and car parking spaces for 50 cars. So here's what you can see. In London, there's a significant difference compared to the 3 other cities, with Los Angeles and Montpellier being the cheapest. So when I spoke to my American friends, they argued that the property rental costs in downtown Los Angeles and Los Angeles altogether was quite cheap because of the traffic jams that there are regularly. So next, it's basically the electrical power. because it's a big concern. There's a lot of IT equipment if you do animation film, and you need a lot of power. So it can be split into two. There's the equipment to start with, and there's also the air conditioning that draws a lot of power. Regarding the equipment, most of the expenditure is actually coming from the workstations that people are using. So you can see we took into account high-end HP Z series workstations, and they draw obviously a lot of power. And there's also a smaller data center that needs to be powered, obviously. And also, all of this has got to be air conditioned. So air conditioning also draws a significant amount of power. As we said, this obviously can be optimized with greener technologies and ways of designing things. The next point is effectively the comparison chart. So you can see here this expenditure is directly proportional to the offers that you can find locally in each of the four cities. One point to note is that Montpellier is the cheapest, and their power is extremely reliable. The network works extremely well. There are very, very rare outages. Office insurance, I've asked many people, and it's a tough topic because insurance companies are always a bit cold to provide figures without having the real fact. But one company actually gave me extremely detailed figures. They're a specialized broker, and they basically said that costs were 10% higher in Los Angeles. So there, for our quote, for a 40 million euro film or $40 million film, we have similar quotes except Los Angeles, which is 10% higher with a 10% premium. Next is the office connection. It's the network, the fiber connection to actually connect to the internet. So we wanted a gigabit link, and we asked for quotes for a professional grade FTTH, which is a bit of a nonsense because FTTH is a consumer connection, but this is a low entry business connection using the similar infrastructure to the FTTH consumer. So it means the prices are not that high. If you wanted to have a proper FTTO, so guaranteed bandwidth, you would probably have to add 10 on the top of those figures in each of the four cities. So there, Vancouver and Montpellier are very cost aggressive. I don't know if you say that. The next point is to do with the property tax. So there you can see a large high bar on the right for Montpellier. This is to do with an office tax called the CVAE, but this can be offset with other services, public services, or more cost-effective services that they are locally. And you'll see in just a second. Because now, if we compare the total office cost with the cost we've just seen, you can see that London is a lot higher, and Los Angeles, Vancouver, and Montpellier are between 700 and 800 K euro. So overall, Montpellier is the cheapest in terms of office. Second part of the operational cost, that's the staff. Again, split into two, the freelance staff and the permanent staff. We used roles that were given by a real animation film company, Dwarf Animation, and we used the roles so that we could derive precise costs for each of the positions. There are positions we didn't estimate, for example, the audio side of things and some modeling, and also all the support roles, whether it's in management or pure support. So our assumptions, there's a long list of assumptions, but mainly we used 70% of freelancers. We used 50% people recruited from foreign countries, so moving into the country for the production. And we used a company with a maximum of 50 staff, 50 permanent staff. We assume that this was starting in December 2018 for our calculations. Freelancers to start with. There are two countries where you can find minimum wages for the freelancers. That's the US in California, with the Animation Guild actually providing guidelines in terms of costs, and that's France, where what we call the Convention Collective provides also the minimum wages for each of the positions. In the other two cities, we used market figures that we could find out using the large network from the school artifacts and other sources. So what we found is that London and Los Angeles are a lot higher, and Montpellier is the cheapest in terms of freelance staff. Now, if we look at permanent staff, Los Angeles is still higher, but both London and Vancouver are the cheapest. Montpellier is high because in the cost of the staff, there are many public services included, and these are the services you will not have to pay for. So, and the cost of living is also lower. So if we talk about the cost of living, on the left, you can see the monthly cost for one person to live. So you can see that Montpellier is significantly lower. And on the right, you have, as an example, the tuition fees for 1 year at universities to study medical, to become a doctor. So on the right, you can see that in Montpellier, the cost is virtually zero compared to Vancouver and Los Angeles. So that's interesting, because if you had a couple, one person works in animation in Montpellier and the other one studies at medical university, they would save around 40,000 a year, 40,000 euros a year. Now, the conclusions for the staff, if we add the cost for the permanent and the freelance staff, you can see that Vancouver and Montpellier are the two cheapest. But the cost of living, again, is significantly lower in Montpellier. It's 18% lower compared to Vancouver. And we know that these costs in Montpellier could be reduced if you reduced the amount or the proportion of permanent staff. We assume 30% permanent staff, which is, we were told, very conservative, and we would be probably closer to 5 to 10%, and then this bar would significantly be lower. And now it comes the summary for the OPEX side of things. So both the office and the staff added together. So first of all, an interesting proportional view to actually see where the expenses are coming from. And you can see that, for example, in this yellow greenish color, which is the office, the proportion is a lot higher in London compared to other places. And in other places, the proportion is about the same between staff, which is the biggest cost, and the office. The fit-out cost for the office, so the capex, is the same in all four cities, as we said earlier. Third section of this presentation is actually which financing you could expect if you moved your animation production to one of those four cities. So grants. There are two sides to this. One is the guaranteed grants. The other one is the selective grants. We thought that selective grants were a lot riskier, and we decided to focus on the guaranteed grants. There are two locations out of those 4 cities where there are guaranteed grants offered. These locations are London and Montpellier. In our assumptions, we made those calculations for a foreign production going into one specific country. So, for example, US production going to Montpellier and being produced by a subcontracting company in Montpellier. So this would be classified as a foreign film. And in this case, in London, you can use the UK tax relief, and in France, you can use the international tax credit, C2I. Again, these two financing mechanisms, tax credits, are guaranteed. So what are the conclusions? Well, Montpellier comes out the cheapest out of the 4 cities when it comes to total production costs, if you include the guaranteed grants. 43% compared to Los Angeles, 19% more economical compared to London, and 12% more economical compared to Vancouver. Again, if we reduce the amount of permanent staff from 30% down to probably 10 or 5, it will be even more economical. So looking at the charts, looking at the bars for this 80-minute feature film, again, for the pure animation production costs, bearing in mind there's a lot more expenditures you need to put in to produce a real end-to-end film and market it. But you come to 10 million euros if you did this in Los Angeles. It's a bit lower if you did this in London and Vancouver. You're just over 7 million. And in Montpellier, you are at 6.2 million euros. Now, as an annex, we wanted to see if we could use that same model, but for an animation series for children's TV. And that's what we did. So we did a proportional calculation using 30 production staff instead of 100 and reducing the square feet for the office space to the same proportion. So 300 square meters for Montpellier and 3,000 square feet for the other cities. And this is what we came up with. So obviously you have the same cost reductions when you do this work, this production work in Montpellier. And if you did this in Los Angeles, you would be over 3 million euros. London and Vancouver, just over 2 millions. And in Montpellier, you are just above 1.5 million euros. So there's a limit to this calculation for the series because obviously we did a proportional rule. Things like a network, internet network, you couldn't say, hey, I've got only 30% of the staff, so I will only pay 30% of the connection. This can't work that way. However, for most of the costs, i.e. staff and office, this would work. This is the end of this presentation. I want to thank you very much for following it. As you've seen, there's a lot of work that has been put in this simulation. It's meant 5 months worth of work for Mesclado and IDATE DigiWord. Like any study, please bear in mind that you need to work out these simulations for yourself, for your business, for your company. Each case is particular, but here we wanted to show the trend and to show the attractiveness of Montpellier in southern France.